Okay, so you know how sometimes you read a piece of legislation and it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah, definitely. Happens all the time.
That's kind of how I felt when I first dug into this thing called the Forged Act.
Oh, yeah, the Forged Act. What part caught your eye?
Specifically, Section 202. It's all about changing how the JROC does its business. You know, the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. Big deal in the military world.
Huge, yeah. They basically decide what the military needs, what they're going to buy, all that.
Right. And this section is saying, hey, let's tweak how they do that.
Interesting. So what's the deal with this change? What are they proposing?
Well, that's what this whole deep dive is about, right? We're going to unpack this JROC reforms excerpt you sent over, try to figure out what this means for the future of military tech and all that.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who might not be totally up on JROC stuff, what's the quick and dirty on what they used to do?
In a nutshell, they had the final say on any big joint military projects. Like, you want to build a new super-duper fighter jet that all the branches can use, JROC had to sign off on it.
And not just sign off, right? They also set priorities, like this new jet is more important than that new tank, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But this Forged Act is suggesting something pretty different. Instead of proving everything, they're moving more towards a review role. Like, they'll check things out, give feedback, but maybe not have the final word.
Big shift. So gotta ask, why the change? Why mess with a system that's been in place for, what, almost 40 years?
Great question. And that's where the history comes in. The JROC was born back in '86, part of this big push for better joint operations after, well, some less than stellar joint efforts. Think Goldwater-Nichols Act.
Right. Make sure everyone's playing on the same team.
Exactly. JROC was supposed to be the referee, make sure the Army, Navy, Air Force, everybody was on the same page when it came to new weapons and systems.
So joint capability was priority number one.
Absolutely. But like any big system, things get a little creaky over time. You start to see inefficiencies, things moving too slowly. And that's what started happening with the JROC.
Ah, so that's where this reform idea comes from.
Bingo! Groups like the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, they started sounding the alarm. Hey, there's too much overlap, things are taking too long, we gotta streamline this process.
Makes sense. The world moves pretty fast, especially the military tech world. Can't be stuck in the mud.
Precisely. And this wasn't just some random idea. The excerpt even mentions Senator Roger Wicker introducing a bill back in December 24, pushing for these JROC changes. So this has been brewing for a while.
So not a knee-jerk reaction, but a considered response to, what, decades of studies and reports and all that?
Yeah, think defense.gov analyses, GAO reports, the whole 9 yards, all pointing to a need for a faster, more flexible JROC.
All right, so we've got the why of the change. What about the what? What good things are they hoping to get out of this?
Well, the excerpt lays out 5 main goals. First up, faster decision-making and quicker acquisition timelines.
Yeah, less red tape, right. Makes sense. If the JROC isn't the final bottleneck, things should move more smoothly.
That's the idea. Get those critical capabilities out to the troops quicker. Second, they're aiming for better teamwork with this new group, the Joint Requirements and Programming Board, or JRPB for short.
JRPB. So what's their role?
Think of them as the folks who do the initial legwork on figuring out what joint needs are and what should be prioritized. Then they pass it on to the JROC for review.
Kind of like a tag team.
Exactly. Less JROC is the king and more let's all work together. Third, less bureaucratic overlap.
Ah, always a good thing. So no more confusion about who's doing what, right?
That's the goal. Clearer lines of responsibility, everyone focused on their piece of the puzzle.
This sounds efficient. What's number 4?
This one's key, aligning those requirement reviews with modern threats. Basically, making sure the process is keeping up with the times.
Makes sense. The battlefield's changing fast. Got to make sure the tech can keep up.
You got it. And finally, they're hoping for a better response to those combatant commands out there on the front lines.
So making sure the JROC is really tuned in to what the troops actually need.
Precisely. Less about paperwork, more about results.
Sounds good on paper, but you know how it is. There are always potential downsides, right?
Oh, absolutely. The excerpt doesn't shy away from those. First up, the risk of not enough oversight.
Oh, yeah. If the JROC isn't giving that final stamp of approval, things could slip through the cracks.
That's the worry. Will that review be enough to catch potential problems?
Good question. What else could go wrong?
Second, potential confusion between the JROC and this new JRPB. Even if they're supposed to be working together, there's always a chance of stepping on toes or things falling through the gaps.
Yeah, like who's really in charge here? Got to be crystal clear about that.
No doubt. Third, delays in getting urgent stuff deployed. If the JRPB isn't as quick as the JROC used to be at spotting those critical needs, things could get bogged down.
Like if there's a sudden need for, I don't know, some new anti-drone tech or something, we can't afford to wait around.
Absolutely. Fourth, pushback from the folks who are used to doing things the old way. Change can be tough, especially in a big organization like the DoD.
The we've always done it this way crowd.
You know them. And lastly, the possibility of different branches reviewing requirements differently. Like, the Army might be lax on something the Navy's super strict about.
Yeah, that defeats the whole purpose of jointness, right?
Big time. So yeah, plenty of potential pitfalls. But the good news is the DoD has some ideas on how to handle them.
Okay, let's hear it. How are they going to mitigate these risks?
First off, clear guidelines and training for the JRPB. Make sure they're up to speed on what they need to be looking for.
Smart move. Got to give them the tools to succeed. What else?
Second, really nailing down those roles and responsibilities, both for the JROC and the JRPB. No ambiguity, regular meetings to keep everyone on the same page.
So communication is key. No silos, everyone talking to each other.
You got it. Third, a phased transition for that prioritization stuff. Basically, the JRC will still handle the really urgent stuff until the JRPB is ready to take over.
Makes sense. Don't want to drop the ball on anything critical.
Exactly. Fourth, helping those folks who are resistant to change adjust to the new system.
The human element, always important.
Big time. And finally, keeping a close eye on how each service is doing those reviews, making sure there's consistency across the board.
So monitoring, evaluating, tweaking as needed sounds like a solid plan.
They're hoping so. Now, who's going to feel this change the most directly? Who are the key players here?
Well, the obvious ones are the chairman of the JROC and all those vice chiefs who make up the council. Their whole job's changing.
Right. They're moving from approvers to reviewers.
Exactly. Then you've got the folks running this new JRPB, people like the director of cost assessment and program evaluation. They're going to have a lot on their plate.
And let's not forget the program managers and all those acquisition folks. They're going to have to adjust to a faster-paced system.
So yeah, a lot of folks within the DoD are going to be feeling this shift. But what about outside the DoD? Who else might have a dog in this fight?
Well, the excerpt mentions a few groups. First, the different service branches themselves. They might be a little wary of giving up some control over joint requirements.
Yeah, they're used to having their say, right? This could shake things up a bit.
For sure. Then you've got the defense contractors. They like predictability, and this change could make things a little less certain for them.
Makes sense. If the process is changing, they might not know what to expect, how to plan their bids, all that.
Precisely. And lastly, you've got those folks the excerpt calls traditionalists within the DoD.
The old guard.
Basically, they like the current system, they think it works, and they're not too keen on rocking the boat.
Yeah, change can be scary, especially when you're talking about national security and all that. So lots of different perspectives, potentially some pushback.
Definitely. And all of this comes with a price tag, right? What kind of resources are they going to need to make this happen?
The excerpt mentions a few things. Funding for setting up this JRPB, training for everyone involved, maybe even hiring some extra analysts. It's investment for sure.
No such thing as a free lunch, especially in government.
Especially not when you're overhauling a huge system. So how will they know if it's all working? How do you measure success here?
Well, they've got a few metrics. First, how much faster are they getting stuff out the door? They're aiming for a 20% reduction in that timeline, from requirement to deployment.
So speed is key.
Yeah.
What else are they tracking?
How often the JRPB and the JRC are agreeing on things. They're shooting for a 90% concurrence rate. Shows that they're on the same page.
So good collaboration. And what about the folks who actually use this stuff, the troops?
They're going to be getting feedback from the combatant commands, seeing if the new equipment is meeting their needs.
Makes sense. Got to make sure it works in the real world. So they considered other options besides this whole review thing.
Yeah, they kicked around a few ideas. One was keeping the JROC in charge of priorities, but letting the JRPB handle approvals.
Kind of a hybrid approach.
Exactly. They also thought about giving the JROC some fancy new digital tools to speed things up.
Oh, like maybe tapping into some of that innovation.defense.gov stuff.
Could be. The point is, they didn't just jump into this. They explored their options.
Good to know. So big picture, what's the main takeaway about this JROC shakeup?
It's all about modernization. They want a faster, more agile system that can keep up with the times.
And the challenges.
Making sure there's enough oversight, keeping everyone on board with the changes, managing those stakeholder concerns.
So clear roles, good communication, and a willingness to adapt as they go.
Absolutely. Big change, lots of potential, but definitely a few hurdles to jump over.
Well said.
So, to you, dear listener, we hope this deep dive into the Forged Act and the JROC has been enlightening. You've got the backstory, the goals, the potential problems, the whole shebang.
We've laid it all out for you.
Now we want to hear from you.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest challenge facing this whole JROC revamp, and what are some unexpected consequences we might see down the line?
Give it some thought.
The future of military tech is in the balance here, folks, and it all starts with understanding these changes. So keep digging into the Forged Act, keep asking questions, and keep those brains buzzing. This is The Deep Dive, signing off.
Until next time.